But I now want to bring into the conversation legal analyst Neama Rahmani. Neama, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. We just got a few of those nuts and bolts about what happened in court today with TMZ, but let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. I want to put this up on folks' screen. If they didn't see this tweet that also came from TMZ today, this is regarding some of the stuff that Homeland Security investigators, a special agent Gerald Gannon, was on the stand today testifying about some of the things that they discovered inside a Combs' Miami Beach mansion. This was during one of those infamous raids, AR-15 style rifles and ammunition as well. Again, Neama here, our legal analyst, here to help us break it down. How much is this going to play into the trial? This, them talking about the raids. He's just now getting on the stand, talking about the meticulous nature of how they conducted this. But for the prosecution, what is it going to be important for them to extract there from this witness?
Christina, this was very important testimony today from the government's last witness to talk about what they recovered from the raids. And we're talking about Miami. So AR-15 components that could be used as automatic weapons, loaded magazines, obviously the baby oil that we've been talking about. But it was testimony throughout the day that really touches upon that force component. Everyone's been asking, well, how is this sex trafficking? Isn't this just domestic violence or isn't this just rape? Well, sex trafficking is force, fraud, or coercion when it comes to sex. And we heard testimony about that force today. So obviously the guns. We heard Regina Ventura talk about the beatings and the pictures of those beatings that Cassie suffered. We even heard from David James, Combs' assistant, that talked about an episode where they went looking for Suge Knight at Mel's Diner, and Combs had 3 loaded guns in his lap. So this is all part of the government's strategy to show that enterprise, right? To show that force and why the freak-offs weren't consensual.
And when we're talking about another person who took the witness stand today, you just mentioned it, Regina Ventura. Cassie's own mother talked about there, shockingly, that she had to take out a $20,000 loan. This is because of some of those threats that Diddy allegedly made, saying that he would release sex tapes of Cassie. This is truly, like you're saying, some of the criminal nature of these allegations that we've maybe been waiting to uncover there in court.
Absolutely, Christina. Even though it lasted approximately only 15 minutes, I think Regina's testimony was probably one of, or if not the most powerful of the witnesses so far. She talked and introduced evidence of the bruising, but it's really that $20,000 extortion demand, right? Diddy was unhappy that Cassie was reportedly dating Kid Cudi. We know that Kid Cudi is going to testify maybe as early as tomorrow. So he demanded in an email through an intermediary, of course, he didn't use his own name, that Cassie pay $20,000 or he would release 2 sex tapes, one on Christmas Day. So this is corroboration of Cassie's testimony that he was using those sex tapes as blackmail. And Regina Ventura panicked. She had to get a home equity line. She wired that money to the account that Combs or his employee demanded. Now, the money was returned approximately 4 or 5 days later without explanation. But Christina, this is extortion. This is one of those racketeering predicate acts. The government is proving through these other witnesses more to the Cassie story. And it was so powerful. Mark Agnifilo, Diddy's lead lawyer, tried to exclude some of this testimony. Judge Subramanian said, no, it's coming in. And after Regina Ventura testified, Christina, the defense just got up there. Mark Agnifilo, he didn't even ask any questions, which is probably the right thing to do when you're dealing with a victim's mother. But again, probably the most powerful testimony, or at least up there with Cassie's, of the trial so far.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think I saw so many people on social media wondering, this is the first time, again, that a witness there brought by the prosecution has not been cross-examined by the defense. What was it behind this decision? How powerful is it that he decided not to go against anything that Cassie's mother was saying? And how does that affect the jurors if they see the defense decide not to ask any questions?
I think the defense is playing this very carefully in terms of how they're dealing with the witnesses. The opening statement, right? Tenny Garagos, a young female. Cassie Ventura, Anna Estevio, again, young female. They're very qualified. I'm not saying they're not, but this is part of the strategy. Yesterday, you had Westmoreland, again, another female who was cross-examining Don Richard. And Agnifilo obviously is the most experienced, the probably one of the biggest names on the defense team. But if you're going after the mom who's talking about how she was shown bruising, beatings that her daughter suffered, right? She talked about an episode where Combs took Cassie's cell phone and wouldn't give it back. She was talking about the abuse that she saw her daughter suffer. What points are you going to score if you're the defense? So they took a very cautious approach. They just got up there and said, no questions. I've seen this a lot when you're dealing with family members of victims where you don't want to go after them very aggressively. And that's exactly what happened here, Christina.
All right. Also, other testimony that we're anticipating, we've been talking a lot about it, some of these high profile witnesses. Kid Cudi, of course, it's been told in court that he was in some sort of relationship with Cassie Ventura, which then spread to a whole bunch and host of other things happening behind the scenes. He could be taking the stand as soon as tomorrow. What will his testimony potentially prove? Why does the prosecution want him up there on the witness stand?
His testimony is going to be very important. I think the government's next witness, though, will be Dawn Hughes. She's also important. She is the psychologist, the abuse expert. She's, of course, testified in other big cases. R. Kelly, people that watch Johnny Depp, Amber Heard will remember her. She's testifying in the Weinstein case. So that's the expert that's going to talk about the psychology of abuse and answer the question, well, why didn't Cassie leave? Why did she stay in this relationship for 10 years? So I think she's next, but I guess after that, all eyes will be on Kid Cudi. He is going to be a very important witness. We heard testimony that Combs threatened to blow up his car. And then the testimony today was he's going to send people after Kid Cudi and Cassie because he was upset that they were in a relationship together. This is the violence. This is the force. And we saw the criminal enterprise today. We saw with James, who was the assistant, things that he was doing to set up these freak offs. So now you have the criminal enterprise and you're having the pattern of racketeering activity. So this is all very relevant information for the charges in the case and what the government's trying to prove. And of course, Kid Cudi is the first after Cassie star witness who's going to take the stand in this case. And the question is he just the last or will there be others as well? You mentioned Michael B. Jordan is probably someone that we may hear from too.
Everyone has been talking about the celebrity aspect as well because it just adds to sort of the interest around the case. But again, no cameras there in federal court. So when these folks take the stand, we'll only hear from reporters who are there in the room, sort of what they've seen and what they hear on the witness stand. All right. So we do have to talk about another witness that took the stand as well today, including the escort, male escort. He was also an exotic dancer as well. He took the stand, though, talking about some of the escapades that he had there between Cassie and Diddy. How important is it that we heard from him? Of course, he had a very interesting name as well, the Punisher.
Yeah. Yes, Hayes, the Punisher, really fascinating witness, the second escort or sex worker that we've heard from. And he told a consistent story from the witness we heard on Monday, day one, that, he would be called. Oftentimes he was called by Cassie herself. He would show up. One interesting thing was he didn't really talk about drug use. He said maybe there was some marijuana use, but not some of the drug use that we had heard from other witnesses. But he would show up and he would be paid anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 to perform these sex acts while Combs watched. Again, consistent story when it came to the freak offs. This is all very important for the government because what you want to do, Christina, is really overwhelm the defense. You have witness after witness telling the same story. Maybe one of them has a motivation to lie, right? Because they filed a civil lawsuit or they want to get revenge or get famous and Combs didn't help them. But when you have all these witnesses who are coming and telling these stories in a very, very public way, and these are embarrassing details, I don't think Hayes wants the entire world to know. But when you have these types of witnesses, and that's why this trial is going to last 2 months. The government is going to make sure that they have enough people to prove all the elements of the trial. Because folks that are watching, they might say, well, Cassie's lying, or, Don Richard is lying, or other folks are lying. But when all the sex workers get up there, I think that's going to be too much for the jurors to disbelieve.
And I have to ask you before I let you go here, Neema, as we're taking a look at some of those folks, as you just said, up on the witness stand, telling their stories. Lastly, we also heard from one of the former assistants of Diddy as well, talking about the nature of their relationship. But you touched on this earlier, talking about an instance where Diddy seemed violent. How does that play into this case? And what can the defense do to try to push back against some of these claims, as well as why is the prosecution bringing up this alleged violent nature?
Christina, the former employees are important, especially the personal assistants. If my assistant Julia took the stand, I would be terrified. She knows where the bodies are buried. And that's how it is in every one of these cases. You had James talk about buying condoms, Astroglide, getting Percocet, even getting just for hair, just for men, hair dye for Diddy. I mean, he exposed all the secrets today. And he talked about an episode where he walked into one of these freak offs. Cassie was on the bed. He saw a male with long hair. He called it a large endowment. So he actually is a percipient eyewitness to one of these freak offs. And he talked about this controlling nature that Combs had. He would search him, he would subject him to lie detector tests. We talked about the Suge Knight episode. Here's someone in Combs's inner circle that knows all the intimate details and the secrets. So employees like that are going to be extremely important. The question I have, Christina, is when will Christina Horam take the stand? She is Combs' chief of staff. I think she knows everything. And if she testifies against Combs, which I expect, that could be very, very damaging for the defense.
And it'll be interesting to watch as well. Of course, Neema, we also want to thank your assistant, Julia, because she helps you get you here on the show each and every day to talk about some of these takes as well. Before I let you go, Neema, though, anything else we should really be on the lookout for? You just mentioned Christina Coram. Anything else we should be paying attention to this week?
Julia is the absolute best. I got to say that. I think tomorrow's testimony is going to be so important. Dr. Hughes. Again, I think she's going to explain that psychology of abuse. Obviously, Kid Cudi, someone who Combs was very jealous about. I think each day is incredibly important. And brick by brick, we're seeing the government prove its case. The defense has its hands full right now.
All right, and we've all been glued and tuned in. Again, and we appreciate Neama Rahmani for joining us here today to break down the very latest in the Sean Diddy Combs federal case. We'll keep our eyes on any updates that continue to come out. Thanks so much, Neema.
Thanks, Christina. Talk soon.